Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this evening, which is here in New York. Welcome to the panel on the future of autonomous vehicles. I'm Sarah KAUFMAN. I'm the Associate Director of the Rudin Center for Transportation at New York University. And I'm so excited to have our panelists to set the stage. On a somber note, every year, over 1 million people die in car crashes around the world, and the rates are only getting worse, at least here in the United States. In almost every crash, 94% in the United States at least, human error is to blame. The drivers are intoxicated or distracted or simply misjudge the scenario. So the promise of autonomous vehicles is that they will change that. The cars don't get drunk, they don't text their friends, and they are built to judge scenarios more carefully. So how real is this promise? And tonight I'm very excited to have two wonderful guests to discuss this. Michelle PEACOCK, Global Head of Public Policy at Waymo, and Gerardo Interiano, Vice President of Government Relations and Public Affairs at Aurora. So welcome to both of you. I'll start off with Michelle. At Waymo, how are you working on this technology to make our cities safer? And in what ways will these vehicles be safer than human-operated vehicles? And in what ways is the technology still in development? I'm here in New York City, where it seems like it'll be forever before we get autonomous vehicles because it's such a chaotic street environment. So what will it take for us to get from here to this promise of safety?
Thanks for the question, and thanks for having me, Sarah. I appreciate it. Well, New York is really challenging. New York City is, New Yorkers like to wear that badge with pride, like we're the most in every way. And in this case, probably one of the more complex environments to launch an autonomous vehicle business. I would say that, in terms of safety and how the technology is still in development, it's a challenging question because there is no one metric that we can use to measure whether or not a car, an autonomous vehicle, is safer than a human. It would be great if there was just a formula where we just plug in a couple variables and boom, we have the answer. But the reality is that there isn't one. And what Waymo has chosen to do is really use a lot of the data that we have as one of the longest existing AV businesses, and having conducted millions and millions of miles in simulation and in real road driving, that we're able to amass a lot of data to and share that with the public, and how our safety methodologies and how we view that the activity as being safe enough to operate. We published a paper that includes our safety methodologies. And it's, I'll be honest, it's 60 pages of some pretty dense material. I haven't been able to make my way through the entire thing, but the punchline is that the brilliant people on our safety team have prepared this document that really outlines like the various aspects that they can measure, and in the sum total can look at that as proof that we can operate safely. And I would say that the other thing that was, gives us, heartens us about the safety factor is another paper that Waymo released earlier this year that sort of aimed to assess how our Waymo driver would have performed if it had been one of the cars instead of one of two cars in 72 fatal accidents in the Chandler, Arizona area where we operate. In Chandler, Arizona, Waymo has a fully operational autonomous vehicle ride-hailing business where you can summon a car, it'll pick you up to give you a ride, and that car shows up with nobody in it. So that's very, very exciting. And so in Chandler, in that area where that business operates, we did in simulation, replaced a Waymo car with one of the cars in these 72 fatal accidents, and 100% of those fatalities were mitigated or eliminated. And And I think that just shows that the autonomous vehicle driver, the Waymo driver here, doesn't drive drunk or distracted, and it's not yelling at its kids in the back seat or drinking spilling coffee down the front. And I think those are some of the things that should be encouraging to the communities that are interested in seeing AVs deployed.
Thank you, Michelle. That is certainly encouraging, and we certainly need this here in the U.S., where we have about 40,000 car crash-related fatalities every year. And so I'm heartened to hear the news of your developments. Gerardo, I'd love to hear the approach that Aurora is taking. How are you looking at safety, and especially in comparison to human drivers?
No, thank you. And Sarah, thank you for having me. Michelle, always good to be on a panel with you again. Safety is core to everything that we do. Aurora's mission is to deliver the benefits of self-driving technology safely, quickly, and broadly. And safety is there as the first adverb because it's a part of everything that's a core to the company. Right? We have 2 safety drivers at any one point in time. Any one of our safety drivers can ground the entire fleet if they have any concerns about the system or anything that concerns them about the safety of the company. So we try to ingrain safety into our culture day in, day out. When it comes to measuring how safe is safe enough, or what does it mean to be safer than a human driver? That is something that we've spent a lot of time as a company and a lot of time working with our partners in government to really understand and understand the data that is behind it. And Michelle spent quite a bit of time talking about that data that is collected by us as companies from simulation, from miles on the road, but there's also a massive amount of data that organizations like NHTSA collect that gives us insight into how do these accidents happen and why are they happening, right? Like, what does it mean to be a safe human driver? So what we've rolled out is our safety case framework. Historically, industry has measured safety by disengagements, right? And that's something that we've worked with governments, but we've also recognized over time that it's probably not the best measurement for what does it mean to be safer than a human driver. And so what we've rolled out is a framework that allows us to work with government and present the evidence to be able to then go to them when we are ready to remove the human driver and say, okay, here is all the evidence that we have collected to show you that we are now safer than a human driver and ready to deploy this technology. I'll give you one example of how this technology is safer today. In Texas, where we have our trucking operations, we're partnering with PACCAR and FedEx to move goods between Dallas and Houston. Volvo is another one of our trucking partners down there. And one of the things that we've learned is that it's actually safer to drive 65 miles an hour. Right, then most of us are driving 70, 75 miles an hour, but there's not only huge fuel efficiencies by driving at a lower speed, we also don't have, people that are concerned about, hey, am I gonna cut this person off to gain the 5 seconds that I might gain to get there in one place or another? So we're making a safer decision every single time. And by driving at that safer speed, we can make decisions much faster and avoid a lot of the situations that human drivers get themselves into. The stat that you started with is what motivates us, right? And the interesting thing about that is that it's also where the alignment is with our partners in government. Right, the departments of transportation, NHTSA, the U.S. Department of Transportation, all of them are very much interested in ensuring that we eliminate these fatalities on the roads and that we begin to change the direction that some of these numbers have been going for the last several years. And so for us, that mission alignment is what allows us to work closely together to see the number of fatalities decrease by deploying this technology that we know will be transformative.
That's wonderful to hear. And I'm so interested in your Texas deployment, and it sounds like a lot of the work is being done connecting different cities. Can you talk for a moment about Aurora's vision for autonomous transportation within cities and what that might look like?
No, absolutely. I think one of the things that we've done at Aurora is really focus on our partnerships. Right, we believe that we are best in class at what we do, which is the technology side of it, and developing what our product is the Aurora driver. Right, so we're focused on the hardware, the software, the cloud services to make any fleet self-driving or any fleet autonomous. But we've also identified partners that are best in class at what they do. So, for example, on the movement of people, we have Uber and Toyota. And you can imagine a world where we have a Toyota Sienna, which is the platform that we're working on, deployed on the Uber network doing ride hailing inside of the cities. On the trucking side, we have PACCAR and Volvo, where we're deploying the technology on their platforms and working now with FedEx in Texas to begin that movement of goods. And if you think about the supply chain problems that we're facing right now as a country, this is a place where this technology can really be transformative. Right? You don't have to worry about the hours of service. You don't have to worry about hired drivers or the shortage of drivers that we have in the United States today. Today alone, it's between 30 to 50,000 driver shortage. That's expected to be over 100,000 by the end of the decade. Right? This technology can begin to address some of those supply chain problems and begin to move goods more efficiently throughout the country and into our communities.
That's a great point. And especially here in New York, the scope is enormous in the potential to deliver freight more efficiently. Here in New York City, there are about 1 million packages a day delivered. And that was before COVID, when e-commerce massively increased. So the potential to help move the supply chain forward and make package delivery more efficient is a key factor in improving urban transportation. So I'm glad to hear that.
Well, and it's not just about the consumer, right? It's also about the retailers and the warehouses and the manufacturers who are not getting the supplies that they need. So like the trickle down effect of addressing the supply chain problem by using autonomous trucking is something that's very real.
Yes, absolutely. I want to move back a minute to passenger transportation. Michelle, you talked about the Chandler, Arizona deployment, and I'd also like to hear about the AV operation in San Francisco. How has that been going, and what do passengers say about the experience of riding in a driverless vehicle and being picked up by a completely empty vehicle? Oh, you went on mute.
Thank you. I'll just start by saying, Waymo has been driving for in cities, in 25 cities across the country and in the Bay Area for over 11 years. And so we do have a lot of experience in this region. And, throughout this time, we have developed a nuanced understanding of the challenges that these dense urban environments pose for drivers. And you can imagine that would be something that we would experience in San Francisco. So our Waymo One service, which is currently in Chandler, Arizona, it's been just over a year now that we launched in October 2020, and we have given over 20,000 rides in autonomous mode. And we're just seeing a great learning process and being able to understand what it is that riders are looking for and how can we deliver a really great customer experience for them. I joined the company during COVID. I have not yet been in one of these cars. I'm planning to do that next month. I'm very excited. But what I hear from our colleagues and other people who've taken a ride in a Waymo One in Chandler is that, they summon the car. It's much like any other TNC ride that you would summon. And the car shows up and there's no one in it. It's very exciting. And then you get in the car and you push the button to start the ride, and the car takes off driving, and there's no one in the driver's seat, and it's thrilling. And then it gets boring really fast, which is exactly what you want in that experience. You want car just to follow the rules of the road and stop when it's supposed to and get you to where you're going. And so I can't wait for that, kind of dull roller coaster ride of super exciting, really boring. That will be really, really terrific. And in terms of what we can deliver to a community, especially in a dense urban environment, is sort of starting to fill some of the gaps, right? Fill the holes in transit deserts, which exist in every urban environment, and creating mobility opportunities for people who have difficulty accessing transit. I also like to say my mother is one of those people, or was one of those people. And before she died, she used a wheelchair. And she had to go to the doctor, and she was like, I'm not getting into a taxi. I'm not getting into a TNC. I don't know who that is. I don't know where they're taking me. She would have loved Waymo. That would have just been the solution of her dreams to get her to where she needed to go. And I feel like that attitude is representative of a lot of people who want that safe experience of riding in a car without someone else, knowing that that car itself would be able to get the Waymo driver would be able to get them to where they needed to go. And then I think the last piece is just the safety aspect for all of these communities. We've talked about traffic fatalities, like we talked about in our Chandler reconstruction paper, but we just think improving safety overall is a benefit to all of these urban markets.
Michelle, you hit on a really good point about personal safety and the fact that riders don't have to travel with strangers. And that's something that we've looked at a lot here at NYU, the personal safety, especially of women passengers. That comes up a lot, especially with TNCs. So do you think that as more people start riding in these driverless vehicles, that it will, a lot of the population will be diverted from public transit to Waymo TNCs? And then Gerardo, I'd love to hear from you after Michelle.
No, I think it's important that we, create an open line of communication with local transit, and find the best ways to like be additive to what is already existing. And I think that, we have a big commitment to supporting public transit, and have done some really interesting work in the Phoenix Valley with the Valley Metro. And we think that AVs can play a really important role in multimodal transportation systems, and fill those gaps that transit just can't fill. I think that we can direct you to our website where there was a report from Valley Metro that shows that East Valley region of Greater Phoenix, that a lot of the users of the service found it to be far preferable to using taxis or rideshare options. And especially for these, communities that find it a little more difficult, the disabled community, and those who might not have access to some consistent mobility options, or at least give them some more choice.
Yeah, and I'll echo what Michelle said, right? It's about those transportation gaps. It's about the deserts that exist, and it's about, addressing those whose needs right now may not be serviced by the transit options that we have today, right? I don't think we see our technology as being competition, but very much a complement to the existing systems that are out there today, and trying to figure out how is it that we support those that have a disability. How do we support a senior that maybe has lost their freedom or their mobility? How do we support, a single parent who has to take 3 different modes of transportation to get from point A to point B? If we can give them that time back, like that is a real impact to somebody's life, to be able to give them that time back with their family. So from our perspective, it's very much a complement to the existing transportation systems that are there, and not something that we see as being a competition per se.
Yeah, Gerardo, you touched on a lot of important use cases as the country ages. And people aren't able to use their previous mode of transportation, whether it's driving themselves places or taking public transit, which can be tedious as physical abilities decline a bit. Taking something like a driverless vehicle would probably be advantageous to them, still giving them freedom of choice and movement without the limitations of traditional modes. But I'm wondering, and Gerardo, I'll stay with you on this, have you heard any apprehension or opposition to different neighborhoods in the cities where you operate, having these vehicles operate within those neighborhoods?
Yeah, I think the answer for that is it's on us, right? It's our responsibility to go into these communities and be transparent, work with them to educate them on what it is that we're doing, how it is that we're doing it, and it's why we invest in these communities, right? We go in and we work with our local government partners, we work with the nonprofits, we work with the educational institutions that are there, and we ingrain ourselves in a community so we don't run into some of these issues that maybe have existed in the past in other communities. Michelle talked about the experience being boring, and one of the best things I've heard from somebody that's ridden in one of our cars is that it was remarkably unremarkable, right? And very similar sentiment, right? Like that's exactly what we want. We want people to be amazed by it at the very beginning, and then to recognize that it's just driving you. And at some point it does become boring, but it's important for us to work alongside our partners in every community to have them understand what it is that we're doing. Because I think a lot of people that maybe have this apprehension, it's because they haven't experienced it, right? It's a fear of the unknown. It's a fear of, well, how is it that you're doing it? Is it safe enough? And when they see us work alongside the city and the departments of transportation and the safety agencies, and they see that we're a part of the community and we're not this company that doesn't want to engage in the community and we're just there, to send these cars driving around, like you build that separation. But the more that we can work closely with community, the more that we can address those issues and get ahead of them. And so that's our responsibility, and it's our commitment to the communities that we go in to be good partners and be engaged and be able to deploy this technology safely.
That's a great point about community engagement. And Michelle, to turn it over to you, I know San Francisco shares a special quality with New York, which is that some neighborhoods say, why are you testing these new technologies on us? While others in the neighborhood say, you know, why don't we get the cool stuff first? So what has been the experience in San Francisco with deploying Waymo 1?
So we haven't deployed our commercial service yet in San Francisco. We are still in the testing phase. It's called a trusted tester, and members of the community can sign up, and we use that process for a whole bunch of things. But really, one of the things we do is to address this issue about neighborhoods. So we find tremendous benefit in getting these insights from the community. What is on their mind? What is it that they're looking for? What are they troubled by? How can we deliver a really good experience for them that it solves their immediate transportation needs, but also their community needs? And over, we want to make sure the community is well educated about the safety aspects. Like Gerardo said, like that's on us to make sure. Most people aren't aware of how many traffic fatalities there are every year. Most people aren't aware of how the life-saving benefits of AVs. And we do have public education campaigns to make sure people understand, like, this is what you're seeing and here's why this is good for your community. And then you multiply that by 6.1 million miles driven on public roads for Waymo, and explain that, safety is at the heart of everything that we do. And just that study after study, like we talked about already, have shown that the Waymo driver is a very good and safe driver of a car.
Sarah, can I piggyback on something that Michelle said that I don't think we've touched on yet, and that's our relationship with law enforcement, right? Michelle talked about the safety component and these fatalities and how the public really doesn't fully understand like what that means at scale, right? Like we don't question getting into a car, yet we have 40,000 deaths on our roads. If those numbers were applied to, for example, air traffic, right? Like people would think twice about getting onto a plane. And when we talk to law enforcement, it's one of the things that they are very keen on is like, how do we get the public to understand like these fatalities happen every single day and they don't make the news, right? And because they don't make the news, we kind of tend to accept that this is a risk that we get into when we get into our vehicles. And that's one of the things that we want to do a better job of, is working with our partners in law enforcement to highlight the fact that like this is happening every single day, and the value proposition that this technology offers is very real to begin to shift those numbers.
That's a really good point. Thank you.
No, and I was just going to say that we do a lot of work with our law enforcement partners too, and create, guides for them on how to interact with the car when, whenever they need to, and make sure that they're up to date on the benefits, the life-saving benefits, but also like the community aspect of it as well, and how they can, when they see these cars, they can engage with them the right way.
That's great to hear. And I think, the more automated enforcement we can have as well is beneficial. Keeping cars under the speed limit or stopping them from driving recklessly is a major advantage. And not having to involve law enforcement in the first place would be ideal, but I'm glad that you have systems in place in case that does happen. I do want to touch on one last item for the evening, which is another thing that's top of mind is climate change. Here in New York, we're experiencing flooding. In San Francisco and Texas, where your vehicles are operating, there were, of course, fires and storms, and Texas had a pretty rough winter. So I'm wondering how you see your AVs providing a mode that's resilient, that can operate even in light of major climate events, as well as how are they sustainable, and how might they be, if they are, more sustainable than human operated vehicles. And Gerardo, you touched on that a bit with the trucks going at slightly lower speeds on the highway. Are there other ways that the vehicles are more resilient?
Yeah, so I mean, a couple of things on that front, right? Like for us as a company, our model is very much dependent on our partners, right? So the Aurora driver is a common platform that we can deploy on whatever platform are available to us by our OEM partners, right? So whether it's Fiat Chrysler or Hyundai or Toyota, right? Like we're deploying on their platform. So we want to deploy the benefits of this technology as quickly as possible because we believe that that impact is real. We hope to one day be able to do it more and more on EVs as EVs continue to become more popular, and we certainly have seen that, just in the last 24 hours about the rise of EVs and some of the data that's coming out about what that's going to look like. But when it comes to the efficiency on highways, when it comes to eco driving, when it comes to not having cars that are just circulating looking for spots to go park, right? And they can be more efficient. We're using our infrastructure in a much more efficient way. And we're actually going to be able to have a positive impact on the environment by being able to use our infrastructure more efficiently.
And I'll just add to that by saying, we have a commitment to sustainability also, and that comes from operating a fleet made up entirely of zero emission and hybrid vehicles. And then, try to extend that through our entire, business and our ecosystem. And so currently we have two platforms for Waymo One, the hybrid Chrysler Pacifica, a plug-in hybrid, and the Jaguar Land Rover I-Pace. And in doing that, we file for reports with the California Public Utilities Commission talking about the number of miles that we've driven. And for our most recent report, all of the miles we drove were with zero emission vehicles. So I think that's, a good indication of what we have ahead. But, beyond that, we are going to be very intentional about EVs and also with charging, in places like San Francisco. One of the things that we're doing is quite meaningful, and that is using our fleet model and the technology available to route our cars to charging stations using being able to, using the route optimization and minimize vehicle miles traveled back to charge their electric cars. So we're trying to layer on these different sustainability and efforts. We're really working within the environment that we have. We love to have more EV charging. I think every single EV fleet business would like something like that, like to see that. But as those capabilities grow, we plan to take advantage of them and leverage them for for the business and for the climate.
Excellent. I'm going to do, I know I said last question before, but I'm going to do one final question, which is that it seems that every year there's speculation that in 5 years, autonomous vehicles will take over the roads. What would you say is realistic about the timeline for autonomous vehicles really making a dent in the safety records, at least here in the United States?
Sure, I'll go first. I think two things, right? I think the concept that the AVs are taking over tomorrow is just not true, right? So anybody that thinks that this is just going to happen overnight, it's going to take a very long time for this technology to be deployed at scale. With that said, for us as Aurora, we've announced that by the end of 2023, we're going to be removing the human drivers from our trucks. And so we have drawn that line in the sand, and we're looking forward to being able to do that and be able to do it safely and work with our partners to achieve that.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to that. Michelle?
And, I would say that, we already are doing this in Arizona, right? We already have this business where we're replacing the drivers. But, as we look at new markets, there's a lot of work that goes into it. And I think, the promise of AV technology and the safety aspect of saving people's lives is still there. I think the timeline's longer than anybody would really like there to be. And that's just a fact. But we are working really hard to go through our process and introducing these AV ride-hailing businesses in new communities. But we have to start with doing things like mapping the entire community that we intend to offer the service. That takes time. We have to, go through testing. We have to account for variables in the unique geographies that we encounter and unique weather patterns, and make sure that the driver is properly trained before we could offer an actual commercial business with the driver, the human driver removed and the Waymo driver taking over. And it's a step-by-step approach that we took in Arizona, and really had so many terrific learnings that we're trying to do the same thing in San Francisco currently, and we're in that trusted tester phase with members of the community. So I think as we can continue to do that at scale, that's when you'll start to see some of those like multi-city benefits of safety benefits of the AV.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to the day that I can ride in both of your vehicles, and when we really see a decline, when we really see a decline in safety incidents in vehicles, and when we can really manage this crisis of traffic fatalities through the technologies that you're both working on. So I want to thank you very much for your contributions tonight. This was a really great discussion, and I loved hearing from both of you. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Sarah. Right. Nice to see you, Gerardo.
Likewise.